Hi again. Today I would like to show you another very exciting attacking game. This time the game is going to feature attacking the king placed on the opposite wing. So something on one hand normal, typical, a situation you might have seen and encountered in numerous occasions, but on the other hand something still quite specific, and in order to know how to play properly in such situations you need to understand that there are some additional things to be remembered. So this time I would like to show you a game played between Boris Spassky and Tigran Petrosian, two grandmasters. This was their World Championship match, game 19 of the World Championship held in Moscow 1969, and one of my favorite attacking games. Let's not waste any time and jump right into it. So there was e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6. So we see the Najdorf Sicilian, bishop g5, knight bd7. This line is popular nowadays as well. It used to be popular. This is the so-called Polgajewski variation of the Najdorf. Very double-sided positions could occur in this setup, but still, this is not an opening survey, so for some additional guidelines, feel free to consult the PGN. White played bishop c4, so Boris Spassky went with this aggressively looking move. Petrosian played queen a5, and at this point it's important to notice that the knight on c3 is pinned, and what black actually intends to do is to play knight takes e4, because as you see the pawn lacks protection right now. At the same time the bishop on g5 is also under attack, so white needs to react. Spassky came up with queen d2, which is solving all of the issues. Currently knight takes e4 is not a move. Petrosian went h6, and again this is probably the first inaccuracy of the game, but it's really hard to blame Petrosian, because h6 is a very natural move just to kick this bishop away in order to maybe prepare g5 in some positions. This is quite a recurring theme in this line. And Spassky went bishop takes f6, and I'm not really sure if Petrosian expected that, although this is still theory according to my database, so probably he must have anticipated that at least. The other move, of course, here would have been just to play e6, and again this is something I've mentioned in the PGN. So h6, bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, queenside castle. As you see, we have an imbalanced position already. White gave up the bishop pair for the sake of having swift development, a lead in development, and also very good attacking prospects, in fact, because if you see this position, white just needs to probably centralize the rook from h1 most likely to e1, and at that point all of his pieces are going to be perfectly positioned and ready for the upcoming battle. So black really needs to speed up his development. He went e6, rook h to e1, already preparing some pressure against the black king on e8. As you probably recall, there are some ideas with knight d5 jumps in many Sicilian lines, so black is already in some sort of danger, but Petrosian dealt with this quite confidently. He played bishop e7, white plays f4. Of course, it's important for white to still emphasize his existence in the center, his presence there. Maybe prepare a move like e5 in order to get better access to black's position, break through, and create some upcoming threats. Petrosian went kingside castle, and only at this point we can talk about attacking the king that has castled on the opposite wing. Spassky went with the, again, quite logical bishop b3. This move is usually aimed at stopping b5, or at least not allowing this move to come with an attack on the bishop. quite a useful one and a logical one as well. Petrosian went rook e8 just to centralize the rook. I think quite a natural move. It also prepares bishop f8, which is a common idea for, well, great many openings in fact. King b1, bishop f8, so both players are preparing for the upcoming battle. And here comes the move that is probably the essence of attacking the king that has castled on the other wing. What white needs to do, and this is of crucial importance, is to open files and diagonals. This is something you probably learned if you have been watching my other videos, my previous ones on attacking the king properly. So in this case, it is particularly important that white does open files, and the only way to do that is by pushing pawns on king side. On the other hand, there are good and bad ways of doing that. Of course, the most natural one would be to play, for instance, h3 followed by g4, or rook g1 followed by g4 without the inclusion of h3 move. However, this is a little bit too slow. White doesn't even care about the pawn on g4, and he plays g4 straight away. So this is a legitimate pawn sacrifice, and whenever you're asking yourself whether it's worth it or not, well, this is the goal. If black takes the pawn on g4, then immediately you manage to open the file, which could be then utilized by the rook, by the queen, and white has a free way to start the attack. On the other hand, if black doesn't take the pawn, he will have to face a move like g5, and then things are not really promising for black, as far as I can tell. So white is actually threatening to open the position thanks to this hook on h6. This pawn accelerates white's attack, and if black takes, he has to deal with the upcoming attack from white. And this is in fact what happened, and I believe this is to be the critical continuation. So knight takes g4 is still played well by Tigran Petrosian. Spassky immediately shifts his pieces to the g file. Again, an understandable decision. This is in fact what he wanted to do in the first place. Knight f6, Petrosian went back. There were a couple of other options here at this point, so let me just very briefly mention that queen h5, transferring the queen to defense, was also a possibility, and I believe that after something like h3, knight f6, e5, knight h7, as you see, white's every single move comes with force. After all, Boris Spassky was called the master of initiative for a reason, and probably e takes d6, bishop takes d6, white just goes f5, and sacrificing the pawn for a position like that, this was a real bargain. You cannot expect to have a better attacking position against a player like Tigran Petrosian, who was at this point he was the world champion. So with such an attacking position, such good attacking prospects, you can really well expect best things to happen, because as you see, white is currently hitting this pawn on e6. All of his pieces are really active. There is also some pressure along the g file, and in the meantime, black struggles with the bishop on c8, with the rook still in the corner of the board, the knight being definitely not where it should be, and the queen on h5 just totally not connected to any of the pieces. For a pawn, this is a really good position for white. So I'm not really surprised that Petrosian opted for the more logical continuation, and this was knight f6, and rook g1 came. So it's not that Spassky wanted to attack. Instead, he gradually, after sacrificing the pawn, he gradually increased the pressure with every single move he made. So queen g2, rook g1, as you see, those two pieces are already lined in order to give checkmate on g7 possibly. If it wasn't for the bishop on f8, this would be a threat at this point already. And even though Petrosian is up a pawn, he cannot really take advantage of this material advantage. He cannot utilize it in any way. In the game, bishop d7 was played. f5. As you see, white is trying to open diagonals as well. If e takes f5 was played, then this bishop on b3 would be ecstatic. So black went king h8, sidestepping this diagonal. I think this is a perfectly understandable move. Rook d to f1, improving the pieces, bringing the rest of the company to the game, and you can already expect some tactical tricks to happen along f-file. In particular, if this knight is going to be removed, then white might potentially get access even to a g8 square. I think this doesn't require too much imagination. And actually Petrosian realized that he needs to protect this knight on f6. And he went queen d8, which is a crucial mistake of the game. It was much stronger to play a move like queen e5. Which is a much better move. It's a centralized move and also prevents another critical move that you're about to witness. So queen d8 was the much more passive of the two, and this allowed the brilliant sequence of moves. When you see Spassky's games, in such situations you realize that, okay, this is going to be over in a moment, because Spassky was really the master of initiative. When he had the chance, he would always smash his opponents like in positions like this. And what he did was really instructive. F takes e6, opening the f file, f takes e6, and now e5. And this is the critical difference. With the queen on e5, black queen on e5, obviously such a move does not exist. And here everything comes with great ease for Boris Spassky. D takes e5, knight e4. This is not really a sacrifice, because as you see, the knight is attacking the knight on f6, and it is worth mentioning that knight takes e4 just loses immediately after rook takes f8, rook takes f8, queen g7. So it's all about removing the defenders of the black king, and knight e4 is just a spectacular way to do this. In fact, Petrosian played the only move, which was knight h5. There are some other lines possible in this position. Again, feel free to consult the PGN in the blog post. And again, as I mentioned before, in such situations, when Spassky just smelled the blood, it was all over. Queen g6, everything comes with force. The threat is simple. He just wants to take on h5 and then use his rooks on these f and g files. Petrosian went e takes d4 and knight g5, and this is in fact the last move of the game. Here Petrosian resigned in view of well, a sequence like h takes g5, queen takes h5 check, king g8, everything is forced right now, queen f7 check, there is nothing for black to do, king h7 and the classical rook lift, rook f3, intending rook h3, g4 just prolongs the game but doesn't change anything, because after rook takes g4, rook h3 is inevitable. Also, if black went e5 at this point, which is possible but is well met with queen h5, please note that currently the g8 square is under the control of white's light squared bishop. So this is the real hero for me of the game, because at the end of the day it proved to be the pivotal figure, and it helped black in many lines here. So a great game by Boris Spassky. Again, there were a couple of interesting moments, sidelines that could have been considered by Petrosian, but in order not to make this too lengthy, I'm going to recommend that you take a look at annotations, and I hope you enjoyed this game as much as I did. Thanks for watching.